So I think it's time now to move to the plenary panel this morning, which is expanded evidence, new wisdom for complex problems. And it will be moderated by my good friend, colleague, Connie Nshemereirwe, who is director of the African Science Leadership Program. And I must say the African Science Leadership Program is dear to my heart as well, because that's when I was introduced about science advice and how it is related to science and to leadership. So, Connie, the floor is yours for the plenary. Please help me in welcoming Connie to the floor.
Good morning, everybody. Allah. When you go to Slido, you're going to see the poll that's running. First of all, let me thank Binyam for that introduction. He calls me his very good friend, but he still cannot pronounce my name. The name is Nshemereirwe. Very easy, come on. And it means I am happy. And so if you cannot pronounce Nshemereirwe, just call me happy. We are just going to test that we can indeed get to Slido. So please scan your badge with your phone and answer the poll that's there. It's just a test, it's not the real poll. Are we all able to get to Slido and answer the poll? Yeah? Have you put in something? So if you're feeling happy, good, inspired, I didn't hear it from this response to my good morning. So good morning, everybody in the room. You don't sound inspired, expectant. Oh, sleepy. Great, wonderful. Jet lag plus adrenaline. I hope you're awaking slowly by slowly. Nervous. Well, a couple of you have jet lag. All right, we shall all go together. So I'm glad that we can access, because we are going to contribute to this panel quite a lot in the room. So have your phones ready and resist the urge to check your WhatsApp, but just have your phone ready. This morning, I will moderate a panel. You can close the Slido. The panel is expanded evidence, new wisdom for complex problems. And I wonder if we might also want to think about that as old wisdom, not new wisdom. And we want to explore what we mean by expanded evidence, the how, the what, and most importantly, the why, as it plays a role in developing government science advice. And to kick us off, I'd like to just share a short story about how we experienced COVID-19 in my country of Uganda. We went into lockdown on March 31st, 2020, and almost 4 months later, we reported the first death due to COVID-19. So the reason we went into lockdown is because countries across the world were going into lockdown. But we have come to wonder if indeed that was the best way that we could go forward, because in the end, we had 170,000 reported cases and 3,500 deaths, which is even allowing for some underreporting is only a 2% death rate. At the same time, in 2021, so we had 3,500 deaths due to coronavirus over the entire period that we had the pandemic. But in just 2021, we had 17,000 deaths due to HIV. And during the lockdown, this rate went up because many people could not access their ARVs. In 2021, we had 13 million cases of malaria and 19,000 deaths just in 1 year. And in the first month after lockdown, in one region in Uganda, teenage pregnancy went up from 1 case reported every 5 months in that region to 13 cases reported in the first month after lockdown. Domestic violence went up. A lot of people fell below the poverty line. And actually we also had the longest school closure in the entire world. When we Ugandans decide to do something, we mean business. 2 years. And so we are still struggling with a lot of learning delays and losses, and some children simply never came back to school. So what's my point? In this panel on expanded evidence, I would like to say that we are all at different stages of using evidence in decision making. In fact, to start, some of us have major issues simply making decisions based on evidence, as you have seen from my short story. But besides that, we could also do better consulting across disciplines. In Uganda, as I've said, we are reeling from the effects of the COVID-19 lockdown across the education sector, economy, and the health sector itself. And then thirdly, we need to gather evidence beyond just the formal science enterprise to really understand what informs us in making decisions. One case that's related to the teenage pregnancy issue is that defilement cases also went up. But it's very well known that these are very much underreported because culturally, we don't find defilement to be a case that you need to take to the police or to the hospital. People will have cultural ways of dealing with it. But the question is it right? Is it wrong? Should it be punished? How can we deal with it? Because in the end, there's suffering for the young girl. And many other issues that we can think about in the room. I'm sure we all have thoughts about this topic, which is in fact the main topic of the conference in general, expanded evidence for more transformation. I will invite our panelists today to come on the stage. Our first panelist, Sheikh Manssour bin Mussallam, was not able to join us. I don't know if they've replaced his photograph. He's still up there. From the Organization of Southern Cooperation, he is unable to join us, so we are going to invite Dr. Jean-Pierre Karegeye. Are you in the room? All right, please give him a hand clap as he comes up. He's the Chief of Section of Transdisciplinary Research in the Department of Research. Just come sit next to me here. Yeah. Department of Research, Evaluation, and Foresight. Our next panelist is Gabriel, who's the Senior Vice President of Global Strategic Networks at Elsevier. Please give her a hand clap as she comes up. Doyin, are you in the room? I don't think these people, you taught them how to clap properly. They are not, I'm not impressed. Come on, please sit next to Jean-Pierre. Then we have my good friend, Justine Nshemereirwe, whose name I also cannot pronounce, so Binyam, I guess you are off the hook. Justine, you will pronounce that name again for us. So plant biotechnologist in the Institute of Medical Research and Medicinal Plants Study in Cameroon. Next is James Wilsdon. James, please, can you give him a hand clap as he comes up? James is the Professor of Research Policy at the University College London. He's also the Director of RORI, a project for research on research. Last but not least, we have Tracy Brown. Tracy, are you in the room? Big hand clap, please. Tracy is the Director of Sense About Science, UK. And now I would like to start us off by asking you, the audience, to answer a question for us. If you go to the poll now, you'll see a new question. And I'd like you to just take 1 minute to think about this question by yourself. The question is, why do we need expanded evidence anyway? Why do we need expanded evidence anyway? I told the story about COVID-19 myself. Maybe you have a thought about it, so just put that thought in. Why do we need expanded evidence anyway? Before you show us the responses, just turn to your neighbor and find out why they think we need expanded evidence. Just talk to your neighbor for a minute. Let them know why you think. If you have no neighbor, please go find your far-off neighbor across the ocean. Why do we need expanded evidence anyway? We're also able to see all our responses on the app. Okay, thank you for these thoughts. To be inclusive, to inform policy debates, to be able to answer quicker when we don't have solid academic evidence yet, for easy decision making. Actually, someone wants to know, what does it mean expanded? I hope our panel will be able to help us a little bit with that. So if you just scroll up and down, you can see all the responses. Because often the narrow pool of evidence that we draw from does not account for the diverse experiences of modern populations. Wide array of evidence is required to make informed decisions. Someone else is saying we must first define expanded so that there is a common understanding of the terminology. Hopefully the panel is taking note. You're supposed to be the experts. That's why you are on the panel. In order to compare viewpoints, diverse ways of knowing and being means the answer to complex challenges is not singular, because we'll be responding to the wrong answers for problems at hand if we don't have evidence. Okay, and so on and so forth. Everyone is anonymous. Some of us are, if you're signed into Slido, then your name will pop up. I see Kevin Govenda here says, make societal impact of science more effective by considering local knowledge content. I think you can edit your answer actually and put your name. if you find your own answer and click on it, I believe you can, if you click on it, you have the option to edit and put your name so we know who you are, because many of you appear anonymous. All right, I'll move on to our panel now. Thank you so much for that input. Feel free to clap for yourself. Big clap. Come on, clap for yourself. Even for yourself, you don't want to clap. All right. I need my small iPad. 1 second. I'll ask the first of our panelists to share their views on the question that the audience has just answered. Why do we need expanded evidence? Jean-Pierre, and maybe if you want to tell us what it is.
Yeah, I would like first to mention that the Secretary General of the Organization of Southern Cooperation was not able to make it due to an emergency with member states of the Organization of Southern Cooperation. Yeah, you mentioned that we need just 1 minute or 2 minutes to talk about why we need to expand evidence. So I think the first, why do we need to expand evidence? One is, what is the evidence? And I think the way we define evidence is the very first reason we needed to expand it. Who has the truth? Who has the facts? So that could be one of the reasons. And I'm talking from the point of view of the Global South. For example, when we look at the sciences or any disciplines, who define, for example, facts. So that could be one of the reasons. So which means the question of expanding evidence is also a theoretical questions, the way we deal with our discipline. A second reason, and going through that, I think they are connected when we really think about evidence, and also the way we need to expand it, is if we consider or we need to redefine evidence, so which means in that way we are no longer have what Chimamanda Ngozi called the danger of a single story. You know, so for example, there is a need to take into consideration endogenous knowledge. For example, that can be very important. Not indigenous knowledge, but endogenous knowledge, considering different aspects. But also, when we are talking about science and the relationship to policy, we have seen like science can inform, for example, policy or government. But most people taking decisions is from their convictions, from ethical convictions or religious conviction. So, and you will see like people from humanities and the social sciences, they are shaping those policies. So in talking about science and governmental policy, it means then in two disciplines there is that need of transdisciplinarity. And it's not just about interdisciplinarity or pluridisciplinarity, but transdisciplinarity, took into consideration different disciplines. And for example, at the level of Organization of South Cooperation, is something we take into consideration, very, very important, that transdisciplinarity. We just opened a Center of Transdisciplinary Research in Gambia, for example, where we have different disciplines working together and to address real issues of people. Mm-hmm. So that's some of the elements I would like just to mention. Maybe the last one, when I mentioned about endogenous knowledge, even at the level of technology, that is very important. So it's not just in terms of humanities or social sciences. We have, for example, a program at OSC called GRACIS, the Greater South Information System, where we try to collect information from different countries of the Global South. And I think expanding evidence means taking into account all those different aspects. Mm-hmm. Very last one, maybe is also about education. Most of intellectuals or scholars who have been trained or educated in Western countries, who have seen, when they come back, for example, they have an issue to address local situations. And you can see that in different novels. For example, Ambiguous Adventure of Sheikh Anta Diop, Amidou Kane, he has addressed that here. Other scholars, for example, Freire Paulo in The Oppressed Pedagogy, address like issues of reality. So I think also there is a need for a balanced and inclusive education that can take into account all of that. Yes.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, Jean-Pierre.
Thank you.
Next.
Can everyone hear me? Great. Is this the one sentence answer that you were asking
Yes.
for? Okay.
And also just if you saw another answer there that you thought was particularly apt, just tell us a little bit about it.
So Connie asked us all to prepare our own thoughts on why do we need expanded evidence anyway. And I believe that we need expanded evidence, more evidence, but also more inclusive, efficient, and impactful evidence to tackle the challenges of proliferating misinformation in a post-truth society. And I saw a lot of that echoed in the comments coming in, essentially to make informed decisions, to make the best decisions. So the question that we are developing and working on at Elsevier is how can we ensure that the information that we are collecting from authors and researchers all over the world is synthesized in such a way to help the community make those informed decisions. We're not making the most of the channels of information we have. For example, scholarly publications, these can be made more representational through analysis and best practice and through integration of different information types, including gray information, as well as we mentioned indigenous information. And these scholarly publications can be made more efficient and impactful by leveraging large language models and artificial intelligence with all the necessary caveats of human-in-the-loop and responsible AI principles. Elsevier has these responsible AI principles, and these are also happily aligned with some of the new ISC guidelines for policymakers, which just came out 2 weeks ago. And I'm happy to elaborate on all of this, but I'll turn it over to the other panelists. Thank you.
Justine?
Thank you, Connie. Why expanded evidence?
Before that,
Yes.
pronounce your name, please.
Nshemereirwe.
Nshemereirwe.
NZW. Nshemereirwe.
Let's go.
Okay. So why expanded evidence? Because we want a more sustainable policy development, which will have impact in people's life. When we add other source of knowledge, it gives a broad approach, more holistic approach, where we can have people view, people value, people perspective integrated, and it has more impact. So I agree with Jean, he was talking about indigenous knowledge. Why? Because it's about practice, it's about skills, like techniques that has been transmitted from generation to generation for centuries, and we cannot just ignore that. And those knowledge has, like, it bring real impact to face the challenges the world is to face the challenges the world have today. And when we expand the knowledge, when we include not just indigenous knowledge, but also holder of those indigenous knowledge, we can have a more fair and just decision making. Because those holder of knowledge are not just a source of information, a source of resources, but when they are at the table, they bring their own view, and we can address the challenges of the society in a broad view. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Justine. James.
Well, thanks, Connie. So Connie asked us yesterday just to do one sentence, and I was just going to repurpose as someone who cut his teeth in science policy in the sort of early years of the open science movement, was just going to repurpose the old slogan of the open source software movement, given enough eyeballs, all bugs are shallow, which I think is still a simplistic but useful mantra. And if we are allowed to elaborate, as others have done, I'll just say two other very quick things. Peter Gluckman last night was generous enough to mention the role of several of us in the early origins of INGSA. And I think, another part of the story that is worth flagging is that there was, obviously at the time, and I think still is, an arena in which some science advisors did meet annually, this Rockefeller meeting, which always took place. It was really only the G7 nations, and it would science ministers, science advisors, and it would take place, I think, on the shores of Lake Como, in a very secretive way. There was no agenda, no minutes, no one ever really knew. It sort of made the Bilderberg group look like a model of transparency. And so when the discussions began about INGSA, in a way, it was about this idea of bringing more eyes, bringing more people to the table and opening up the conversation about science advice, which, of course, we've seen INGSA continue to do. And this meeting is a fantastic illustration of the working through, as many people, Jeremy as well, have said in the last session. So it's great to see. I'll stop there. I should say more, but thank you.
Thank you so much, James. Yes,
Thank you,
Tracy.
Connie. Thank you. I really smiled when I saw someone's put the comment wholesome, to have wholesome policy answers. And you smile at that, and then you think, actually, that's exactly what's needed. Answers that work for the real unfolding of events, but work also for everyone involved in that, and take account of how everyone is experiencing those events, because policies always have winners and losers, and they always involve trade-offs. And so I think the reason for me why we need it is because the policy and societal question is never quite the same as the research question. That's why we need expanded evidence. We need to be able to think about the relevance of the data that we have and the quality of it in terms of its ability to answer the question that we have. And also, I think we need to think about the gaps that exist. So expanded evidence doesn't just mean more stuff. It means a good account of what we don't know and need to know. So that's, for me, what expanded evidence means.
Yeah. I give you the praise for the most concise answer. Not that the others didn't give us good information. No, I completely do agree. No. You have time to pull your socks up. Okay. I thought it might be fun to ask ChatGPT actually as they were speaking, and you might want to ask them as well. But because I didn't really have an answer myself, and it says overall expanded evidence in government science advice, and I found out yesterday that's very important. The question you ask ChatGPT, I guess we would all get different answers, but it enhances the quality of decision making, promotes public trust in government actions, and increases the likelihood of achieving desired policy outcomes. I wonder if that's a good summary of what we said. But we also had a lot of answers from the room that I thought were spot on. All right, now the next question that I'm going to ask the audience is, I'll just make it active before our panel dives into it. Are you on your Slido? If you found the old question, just refresh. And I would like you to just share your thoughts on thinking about the country that you're from, the region you're from, or globally. You can think at any level. What complex challenge would most respond to expanded evidence? So what complex challenge do you think about that would most respond to expanded evidence, as you've heard our panel describe? Either in your country, so you can say in Uganda, I think the complex challenge that would most respond is ... Or globally, or in East Africa, or in Africa. We would love to receive your thoughts. And if possible, you can also leave your name. If you could just say, because these are either global or regional or country-specific? Because government advice acts at these different levels: global, regional, and so someone says today, all challenges are complex and interconnected. That's Jan. Somebody said fraud, although they think it's not complex. I think it's pretty complex. Globally, adjust climate transition, emergent contaminants. In the UK, increasing social inequality. Zimbabwe, state capture, energy crisis in Nigeria. These are the complex issues that we think might respond best to expanded evidence. Climate change and sea level rise in the Pacific region, most definitely. In Ireland, the most complex problem that would respond to expanded evidence is the need to reduce emissions in agriculture and land use management while retaining farm viability. So we agree that these are some of the most complex challenges, whether at our country level or regional or global level, that would best respond to expanded evidence. At global level, lack of philosophical and critical thinking is the complex challenge for expanded evidence. I really must agree. Impact of high consumption of factory farmed meat. So there's plenty of complex challenges. And they persist apparently because the way that we apply evidence or the evidence that we have gathered has not enabled us to solve them in any adequate way. Minimum wage in Ghana, the issue of illegal mining and pollution. And our panel will talk to us about the whole range of what we mean by expanded evidence, but also I think one of our panelists will point out the fact that we do have evidence for some that could help us solve, that we already have the evidence that could help us solve these issues, but there are ways in which we are not using that evidence. Okay, thank you very much. Please keep those coming in, and remember, do leave your name if possible. Just let us know who it is if you see that many of you are anonymous. In the next round of questions, dear panelists, I am adding you a short question. Our keynote this morning mentioned our ability to think of things on our feet. A question that came up in the earlier part was, what is expanded evidence? And I'd like you to start all your submissions with just answering what, in your view, is expanded evidence. We're answering why do we need it, but perhaps we also want to know what it is from your point of view. And then you'll go on to address the issue that I had asked you to deal with. But before that, I will now open the live Q&A. And I would like to request you, as you listen, to please make your comments not in your notebook, but on Slido. Because we would really love to collect all our thoughts about this issue and have those thoughts be available to all of us. So do put your comments in Slido as you listen, or your questions. And if you have a question that is going directly to a particular person, do say, my name is so-and-so, my question goes to so-and-so, and it is ... As we go down the panel, I guess we shall become more used to this way of doing things. But do put in your comments any insights that or things that you want to add to what they are saying, and your questions as well. I'd also like to point out that for every question or comment, there is a possibility for you to like. In that way, you can upvote the question or upvote the comment so that they are the comments and questions that appear at the top. And with the time that we have in the Q&A, we can address those questions and comments first. Is this clear? All right, it might be a learning curve for some of us, but I think we'll be okay. Right. We shall go on to our first input, which will come from Jean-Pierre. Jean-Pierre, remember, first, what is expanded evidence? You had already touched on it a little bit in your earlier submission. But I must say, for me, the word endogenous was new, and maybe it was new to some of us. What does endogenous knowledge entail? And how can this be integrated in the current science advice landscape? So firstly, what? Everyone will answer what is expanded evidence, and then maybe tell us a little bit about what is endogenous knowledge and how can this be integrated in the current science advice landscape.
Okay, thank you.
You have 5 minutes. The clock is over there.
5 minutes? Okay. Yeah, normally when we talk about indigenous knowledge as such, we do consider not just local realities, history, traditions, but endogenous knowledge receive also elements. It's like having different sectors, different realities. Of course, you have local realities, but you take into account like a knowledge you have inside, but also any knowledge that will come also from outside. I would say is a way of having like endogenous knowledge. You will have indigenous knowledge, but we have also other knowledges coming from different places. So and that's why it's very important. And how this can be integrated, I would say not just integrated in sense because it's part of our knowledges. So it's just not one and accepting like endogenous or indigenous knowledge coming from somewhere. So what happened is just like taking like one example just I'll give is like Rwanda right now, where they have, for example, homegrown solutions or initiatives or best practices. So they are using like realities from Rwanda, knowledge from Rwanda, also knowledge from outside. For example, they use like technology, cell phones, in the case of medicine, but also, of course, taking that the reality you are going to. And another example I may take is from, because I'm from also that organization, what we are trying to do with the GRACES that I mentioned is a program where we are using also knowledge coming from different places of the Global South and to inform people from the Global South, scholars from the Global South, also from the Global North. So it's a way of expanding knowledge. And another element I think for me very, very important, when I was reading the questions there, someone mentioned how is it so important to decolonize like knowledge. Someone who mentioned that. So that is also very important. For example, that can start through the system of education we have and the system that can take into account like a culture of a people, can take into account not just a culture, but also transdisciplinarity that was mentioned, I mentioned in the beginning, but so, and also inclusivity, you know, in that way. So those, I would say, they are very important elements we need when we are trying to expand evidence. And as I mentioned, and I want again to repeat it, when we are talking about science, informing, for example, government or in a way creating policies. Yes, we inform people, they have data, but when it comes to take decisions, most of the time it will be other elements that will play on, you know. For example, in politics is a city, so you see how they can, why they decide to take decision on different sectors. So, and that's how I would say quantitative approach very important, but we should not ignore the qualitative that can help to understand why people, they want to take decisions, why they act in that way, especially policymakers, you know.
All right. Thank you very much. As you were speaking, in the room we saw that there were plenty of complex problems, and we can think of more and more. And as you were speaking, I thought of one in my city of Kampala, which is the motorcycle riders that cause a lot of chaos on the road. But, you know, there's more and more of them on the road because we also have a high youth unemployment. We have, so it's a political issue. We might think it might, and, you know, we have wards and wards that are full of people that have these accidents on these motorbikes because nobody will wear a helmet. Here in Rwanda, it's quite impressive to see that the rider and the ridee wear helmets. And that's what you're saying about to solve an issue in the society. To give advice to government, they can take your scientific advice, even indigenous knowledge, also endogenous, but then they also have to listen to other information, which you might also call evidence to make their decision. Yes. Okay, thank you very much. Anne. Again, yes. What is expanded evidence according to you? But also, you did tell us that part of the problem is that we do not adequately use the evidence that we do use. And at Elsevier, you apply AI or use AI, utilize AI to make more of the evidence that we do have. So please tell us more about this.
Thanks very much, Connie. And some of you saw me talk about Scopus AI in one of the parallel sessions yesterday. But before I come on to that, I want to talk again about what I think is expanded evidence, which means it has to be inclusive and efficient and impactful. And just to give you an idea of how we're tackling that challenge at Elsevier, we're dealing with an incredible growth in information. I think estimates are that there are 5 million new journal articles published every year. But at Elsevier, we received 3 million article submissions, and in 2023, we published over 630,000 of those articles following peer review. The global scientific community accessed these articles over 2 billion times on our journal platforms in 1 year. But it's not necessarily enough, and I wanted to address issues of inclusivity in terms of that research and how we can make it more effective for science policy and just some of the ways in which we look at that question. Evidence production and synthesis has to be more inclusive by including more information types. And when you were talking about endogenous knowledge, all I could think about was, oh my gosh, the metadata associated with this. How do we bring it all together? And that is a challenge, and that's going to take years and networking and connections. We have a long way to go. But there are ways in which we are making our current research paradigms more accessible to all through open access and pan-publisher programs like Research for Life. And I know there's a lot of concern in the room as we move to more open models about article and article processing charges. And I just wanted to highlight that Elsevier has instituted what we call geo-pricing for article processing charges, which offers 100% remediation for 26 low-income countries in a graded scale above that, because we are well aware that changes in the way that scientific communication occurs result in a movement of inequities of different types. Our partners in solving these challenges include libraries and also countries all around the world, and publishers are generally making progress. The other point about inclusivity in research that I wanted to stress relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I saw that one of the challenges that came up in terms of problems countries are facing is gender equity. And we at Elsevier take this really very, very seriously. And some of the things that we are involved in together with other publishers are spearheading the development of a new self-reported gender, race, and ethnicity scheme, which has been adopted by the Joint Commission for Action on Inclusion and Diversity in Publishing. It's a collective of 52 publishers led by the Royal Society of Chemistry to more accurately understand the demographic diversity of authors, editorial decision makers, and reviewers. And this is important for science policy because gender needs to be represented in the research and in the management of research. We have a new report coming out on May 20th, which I invite you all to look at, mapping gender in the research landscape. In the meantime, we are collecting, through this voluntary scheme, data for editors, reviewers, and authors. They can now choose to self-report their gender identity, and the uptake has been phenomenal. We have more than an 80% response rate. So again, what you measure, you can change. And we have actioned the information that we are getting, and we have increased representation on the editorial boards of our journals. And I'm happy to report that the international advisory boards at the Lancet's group of 23 journals rose from 30% in 2019 to 53% at the end of 2021. So now we are really looking at equity from within the scientific system. And I'll come on to one more point about inclusivity, which includes accessibility, which is not necessarily about access to information, but accessibility itself. And our accessibility policy ensures that we consistently and proactively make our products fully accessible to all users, regardless of their physical abilities. And we were thrilled that in 2023, the WebAIM Million Report ranked ScienceDirect as the #1 most accessible homepage on the internet. So this is important when you think about just the inclusivity of the entire enterprise. And I could talk about this at great length, but I don't know where I am with my 5 minutes. But I want to come on to what we're doing with AI, because that moves from the inclusivity of expanded evidence to this idea that it needs to be both efficient and impactful, and that synthesis of information. So what we are working on together with colleagues across the globe, but most notably our Chris Tyler and colleagues at UCL in this room, is building out frameworks from our Scopus AI database, which mines 90 million scientific records to share and synthesize information across that research, which can assist in evidence-based policymaking. And it's important because it's in essence a walled garden of peer-reviewed research, so that policymakers can understand where the scientific claims are coming from. And this is going to be very valuable, because when an assertion is made in a post-truth society, you need to know who they said it, why they said it, how many times it was cited, and what kind of real value that content has. In order to improve this, and this is a work in progress, we need more types of information. We need this project to be vetted by others. But I invite you all to join us on this journey as we use AI to make the content more efficient and really create interdisciplinary opportunities to surface unseen patterns in algorithms and really assist acceleration of the science policy process. Am I at 5?
Yes, you are.
Okay, so thank you very much.
Thank you
I'll
so
stop
much.
there.
And I really love your synthesis of what expanded evidence is, or how you're dealing with it at Elsevier, being inclusive, efficient, and impactful. And efficiency is really important, because we all know how much time it takes us to wade through papers, and we can't really make sense of all of it, and we'll miss some. And, so I think efficiency is really important and impactful in the end, but also, of course, accessible. Thank you so much. I appreciate all our questions and comments that are coming in. Go to the Q&A, audience Q&A, read what's coming in. If there's something that you would like to be answered, because we, of course, have limited time, do upvote it or put in your own question or comment. And we'll move on to Justine. Justine, I know that you do work with medicinal plants, and I wonder, just as a formally trained scientist, and I think many of us might ask, how might we even expand our ways of doing science, for that matter? what have you had to learn to do? What skills have you had to sharpen to carry out the research that you do? If you can share with us. But first tell us what is expanded evidence according to you?
Thank you, Connie. Expanded evidence is linked to proof, fact, knowledge to inform decision-making. I can say it short like that. So to share my experience, I'm a plant biotechnologist. I work on developing methods of production, propagation, domestication, conservation of medicinal plants. And this all has to do with laboratory work and field work. And the field work, we need absolutely collaboration with traditional community or local community or indigenous community. So, for example, when we have to harvest a specific species, a specific plant in an area like a mountain or a village, so we cannot just go there like to find a plant in about 5,000 meter square where we don't live. So it's kind of difficult. That's why we need them to identify the species, to help us collect the species, and to tell us how they use those species, how they conserve the species. And there's a lot of information that we gather from them. So when working with them also, as plant biotechnologists, we need to consider the ethical part of it, meaning that respect, integrity, in such a way that we need their concern when you want to work, even with individual, even with the local community. So when we integrate them usually in our research, they feel not like completely part. They give information, but they feel not completely part of the game, because they prefer a kind of co-creation where we don't need them just for collecting the sample, the plant, but also to co-design the research, like kind of win-win partnership where they will be there, where their value, their need also will be integrated in the research. And the good thing about that is we can confirm a model of research that exists already. We can develop new hypotheses. We can also discover like new things or new aspect of the work. And working with them is very nice, especially when we put in front trust, where we have to share truthful information, relevant information that align with their identity, past, present, even future. I mentioned the past because usually indigenous community has been part of marginalization, and when you have to collaborate with them, we need to make sure we fix or we try to balance that power imbalance which exists in the past. And then from that, usually what we do, we prefer work with a scientist which belongs to those communities because he can know both reality. So he can speak their language, he has their value, he can help us go through some cultural process easily, or he can do it for the team. So now there is one aspect that is good when we work with them. When they trust you, they share a lot of information, even far more than what you were expecting. How they deal with the climate change strategy. Sometimes they need to soak the seed in the water to make it more resistant to the drought. Sometimes they show how they observe the water, the color of the water, the strength of the wave, sometimes the sky, sometimes the fructification of a special tree. They can say that when mango produce a lot of fruits, it means that it will be a strong wind or a strong rain coming. So there's a lot of information that they share with us. Now, one aspect maybe that is important to develop with them is to capacitate them on their rights, what their benefit, especially countries have signed a lot of international agreements to protect their right, to protect their resources, but sometimes it's not well implemented. I'll take, for example, the Nagoya Protocol for for exploitation of genetic resources and traditional knowledge associated to the resources. So many countries have signed the agreement, but sometimes the benefit, the population can't benefit enough for the exploitation of those resources. And maybe we can just advocate for the intellectual property, because there is no conventional intellectual property system that protects the traditional knowledge. So I can just say that that aspect also of protection is very controversial. Some think that it's good to protect traditional knowledge because at least community will get benefit from the commercial exploitation. Others say that it's a cultural property, it's transmitted from generation to generation. You have to, if you protect it, you privatize it, or we can bring that social value behind that. So that things that sometimes we need to inform them, capacitate them so that they can know their right and they can also advocate for that. So I think, Connie, that's what I can say. Hope that I didn't go too much in terms of my work with traditional knowledge and all that aspect that I involve in the work.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, the people here can always approach you and get to know more. But I just listening to you, it strikes me that this partnership between ourselves and the other knowledge, the other knowers in our communities or societies can be very empowering to both of us, because to them, first of all, you know, their knowledge is valued, and we also can give them information about some rights that they didn't realize they had or that had been recognized. But you also mentioned that we also learn a lot more than what we went to find out. So that can really expand our perspective on the issue that we are investigating. So I think it's so much more benefit to everybody, besides even just that we are expanding our evidence. James.
Thanks.
Going on to you and maybe continuing a little bit from what Justine has shared.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. So I thought I would just talk about expanded evidence in the fields of science and policy analysis that obviously many of us in the room in our day jobs find ourselves moving between different domains of and parts of these systems, or certainly we do over the course of a career. And I'm interested in increasingly, particularly having myself moved around these debates in different ways and at different times, in the processes of adoption, diffusion, of different methods and concepts from different parts of the science, research, innovation, policy landscape, and ultimately the prospects for greater synthesis, or at least more holistic understanding across those. So, you know, we're all familiar with the old Harvey Brooks heuristic from the 70s. You know, when I used to teach science policy, we'd always start by saying, well, there's, you know, science for policy and there's policy for science. Very quickly, of course, then you complicate that and you end up talking about science for science and policy for science for policy. And of course, you can go even further. So that's one way into sort of trying to make sense of these landscapes. Nowadays, we've got other framings, other ways of entering these debates. You know, here at the meeting, we've got big representation of the community of people in and around uses of science in for diplomacy, science innovation in for development. There's a huge community of people who are thinking and working on aspects of evidence, research, use and utilization in all sorts of fields, you know, with large debates. And of course, you go to the innovation side and you've got even more complicated mosaic of different constituencies and approaches. In the research, sort of the more in the public research system at least, we've also seen in the past, you know, 8, 9, 10 years, a big explosion of what we're now often talking about under these labels of meta-research, meta-science, science of science, research on research, title of my own institute. And this is very much, I mean, picking up on you know, what we've just been hearing in terms of AI and other methods, pulling in new, different methods, often new and different constituencies from within science and research to target those methods at problems, issues, challenges in the organisation, running, management, design of the science system itself. So as I say, I think one challenge for expanding evidence, I guess, is thinking harder about what is going on in these different sub-communities or different framings of often very similar problems. And I'm very struck, having spent a lot of time in this community, including obviously early on when we were setting INGSA up, and then certainly recent years being more in the kind of meta-research world, I'm very struck by the potential even across that divide for much more exchange and learning. So I think there's a huge amount that the science advice community could teach meta-research about the challenges of uptake and the actual transmission of evidence into decision-making. There's often a rather simplistic and naive assumption in a lot of meta-research that, simply running the numbers and coming up with the answer is going to therefore lead to instant and radical transformation in the running of a particular part of the science system. Of course, when that doesn't happen, people scratch their heads. But of course, we know, in this community, we know a lot about what goes on and why those movements are slower and more complicated. And in the other way, I think, as Anne's just been saying, I think there's a lot methodologically that can be brought into science advice and these areas of science policy from some of the really exciting stuff that's going on in meta-science, meta-research, including these AI-based tools, but not exclusively those. And there is that work going on. Chris Tyler and others who are here have been working in that area, lots of exciting potential. But for me, if we're serious about expanding evidence, as I say, we've got to put more emphasis and investment on the systems, the networks, the institutions for transmission, exchange, learning, even within our own relatively discrete world of science, research, and policy. Thanks.
Thank you so much. James, we'll hear from you, Tracy, in a moment, but I just want to bring the discussion back to you, Jean-Pierre. You wanted to comment a little bit on the preservation of indigenous knowledge that Justine was just saying.
Yeah, I was listening to Justin talking about indigenous knowledge, also mentioning what you do in terms of expanding or dissemination of knowledge to the journal you mentioned. And what came up to me when we were also talking about indigenous knowledge, and one of your questions was like how this can be in dialogue with the science. And I think one of the examples I would like to that I mentioned, but in a clear way, is about the Greater South Information System. So what we are trying to do is to bring, to make knowledge, democratization of knowledge, to make accessible what has been produced in a different part of the Global South. And the second, not just about from academic disciplines, but considering also knowledge from non-academic disciplines. And now we have been able to collect more than 10 million articles from different places from the Global South. And this is free of charge. And there is also a peer review that is available online. So people can have access to that. So that is something, and I think that is very important in terms of improving access to knowledge and they make also education accessible to all. But also something very important when we're talking about endogenous knowledge or indigenous knowledge, also there is an aspect of a preservation. So we are collecting like oral history or from different places, and someone from like Rwanda can have access to indigenous knowledge from Mexico in different places. So it is something I wanted to mention.
Okay, thank you so much. And I guess, Anne, you might want to apply some AI on top of all that.
Indeed, I would just like to say that, thank you. Scopus, the 90 million records that I was talking about, is from publishers all around the world. But I think we need to ensure that we have the coverage that you're suggesting. And so, there's an offline conversation that we need to have. Scopus has an independent advisory review board of academics. So socializing these ideas with that board, I think, is of paramount importance. It's not something Elsevier decides, our advisory board does. And I think that having that inclusive approach and ensuring that we are covering the Indigenous knowledge in this one tool, and I just want to say, it's just one tool, right? There are other ways in which we are trying to reach people with our content. Mm-hmm. May I just tell a quick story?
Sure.
So, during the pandemic, I got a call from Ashish Jha, who at that time was heading up the White House task force on COVID. And he said, Anne, he was calling Elsevier and other publishers, but he said, what can Elsevier do to help? The word isn't getting out about the antiviral medications, particularly in nursing homes and where elderly people were not on the receiving end of the antiviral that had to be prescribed within days of being diagnosed with COVID-19. Nobody could develop a policy briefing as quickly as was needed to be disseminated. So what we did was we used Osmosis, which is a very friendly video channel technology that's designed for healthcare professionals. And they could view this video that was very simple, very graphic, talking about Paxlovid and its benefits and when it needed to be prescribed. And so we just have to bear that in mind. I'm happy to talk about AI, and it's wonderful and it's efficient, but the medium is the message, and the message has to hit the audience where it lives. And that's just one example from the US of how that was successful.
Okay, and actually as you speak, it makes me think that even within the science landscape, we need more people working in the different parts of the enterprise, including getting this information out, simplifying it, communicating it. And it brings us to you, Tracy, just to wrap this up for us, and because what we are concerned about is how all this evidence can be used in decision making. And what are your thoughts on what the actual uptake and impact of the expanded evidence that we are talking about?
Thanks, Connie. I think we're working with quite a number of definitions, and the first I would caution about is we do need to ask where to be targeted about this, because whilst it's applaudable to expand the scholarly literature, most of that's not relevant to most policy questions, as most of the existing policy literature is not relevant to most policy questions, and a lot of it's not very good. And not good up to the job. Mm-hmm. And so we need to be careful to maintain those questions of relevance and quality. Yeah. And I was interested in seeing the list of complex problems that you all put up, because for me, the ones that resonate the most are climate. Because climate is one where we're working at a very broad, generic number of a percentage increase in climate that means absolutely nothing for you and you and you and you. It means nothing for all these species. We need to understand this on regional, local levels. That's what people are trying to interact with. My big frustration is that a lot of the data and information that is provided to people is at a very broad, general policy, global level. And useless, absolutely useless. And in fact, we run a program, Sense About Science, globally on risk, which is helping people to articulate the risk trade-offs that they're trying to make and look for relevant information and data, and if it doesn't exist, to find it. I was really cheesed off last year when I saw the UN berating people over not taking action on climate. And then you look at the quality of the information, the generic information they're getting, higher risk of floods. How do you act on higher risk of floods? Well, you're going to sow a crop that is flood resistant with a guaranteed 30% drop in yield against this vague notion of higher risk of floods, changing average rainfall. Average what? My farm, your farm? My country, your country over the year? No clarity about what kind of average is being used there. There's a real need, I think, for expanding that kind of evidence. Farms at the moment the World Bank has noted this, farms are generating millions of data points. Are those data points from farms in, say, Uganda, going into the apps that are going to be sold out to the farmers' cooperatives? Mm-hmm. right, to help them decide what to plant when and when to harvest, right? Is that the data that's being fed in? So there's a whole lot of work to do. One of the big contributors to this risk project is Bernard Akebe, who's a journalist in vernacular radio in Western Kenya. And he's trying to help farmers to find their way through. And he thought his mission at first, as so many people often do, is to take the research out and get people to understand it. He quickly began to realize that the information just isn't there in a way that speaks to the genuine trade-offs and policies. And you mentioned, obviously, at the beginning, you mentioned the pandemic. What a great example. How incredible that all over the world schools were being shut and no one thought to model how to optimize two outcomes. Instead, you just got constant feed-in. Again, the policy, the way that the policy question is being posed, or the societal question is being posed, is not necessarily the way that the research is being done. You know, can we monitor transmission in schools? Actually, how do we close schools in a way that best reduces transmission, you know, but does the least damage to growing children? No one models that. Isn't that incredible? So I think there's three things that we need. I think, first of all, we need to hear the questions, and I do think that science advisors need to be ready to equip us with those questions. You know, when things are coming along the track, like we're using AI in decision-making increasingly, are we asking, and I wrote about this in the viewpoints, you know, who is helping us as a society to identify what questions we should be asking, what these implications might be for the quality of the information we're using. So there's a lot of work to be done, I think, in the science advice sector, thinking, well, what are politicians going to ask about this? But also, more broadly in society, we need to be thinking about those questions and hearing those questions. The second thing is, I think, we need to give people a lot more context to the information we have, how reliable it is, how relevant it is to the question, how many diverse answers there are to this one question. Too much information. We just need to end the days where people are announcing, doing show and tell on their one research paper. So much PR, so unnecessary, so little public benefit to any of that. And finally, I think we need to make sure that researchers are confident in having these kinds of conversations. You know, one of the things Elsevier actually and The Economist published some research a year or so ago that showed that researchers feel very much compelled to want to contribute to policy and societal discussions of this nature, but utterly overwhelmed at the idea of having a common ground about talking about things like uncertainty and gaps and so on. So something that we're very keen to take an initiative on, but others should be too. So those are my three challenges.
Thank you so much, Tracy. And that right there is actually the reason I left academia, because, as you say, when I spoke more, when I took the research that I was doing and I was trying to see how might it be applied in my society, everyone said, oh, you know, that's really wonderful, but the questions that we have are 1, 2, 3. So in fact, as you say, the scientific questions are not always the policy questions. And so that's why in 2020, I gave myself my own title, which is Science and Policy Facilitator. So if there are people in the room that would like to become one of us who facilitate this, you can come and ask an expert by now. Thank you very much. All right, so let's go back to our questions now, and I'll ask the technical team just to put up the questions that have come in. I ask you also, please, to go to your Slido and find the questions that are there. If you want to add some others, or if you want to vote some that are there, or comments. Panelists, I don't know if you have your phones with you, or if you just look on the screen. We have about 20 minutes to go, so that means we can pick one or two to respond to as we give our final remarks. Technical team, would you put those up? But we can all also see the responses on the Q&A online, on the Slido app. Go to the Q&A part. Is that the Q&A? Audience Q&A. That's a poll. Show Q&A. The Q&A over here has 16 questions. Okay, Q&A at the top. Live polls, and then there's Q&A. Next to analytics. Oh.
Maybe someone could shout out a question while we're waiting.
Can you read them? Sorry. Yes, over there. Okay, there you are. And I think it's also important for all of us to really engage with these questions. I don't know why you cannot see the questions there. Just click down here where it says show Q&A down here. See if that works. Okay, no, it's okay. It's over there. It's up. All right. We have questions like how to deal with populists who just don't care about the evidence in terms of article journals written in English and published, or could we add other types of evidence? How can we motivate policymakers to consider a broader range of evidence sources? So just listen to these questions or read them. Oh, please, can you show them on the screen so that the panelists can go through them? Okay. All right, we also talk about how do we manage backlash from people who benefit from the use of contracted evidence in policymaking? How can we address the lack of confidence in indigenous knowledge indigenous technology by local communities, when the status quo is to rely on the outside? Would expanded evidence-based decision-making allow bad politicians to use pseudoscientists to push other agendas under the guise of a scientific decision? Could we have those questions on this screen as well, please, technical team? Tracy, I notice you don't have a phone. Maybe you can just look up here.
Yeah,
Is that okay?
can I just, it's fine. Can I actually pick that backlash question quickly and just say, I think you have to be honest that the public debate can be rough and it can be very difficult. And one of the things that I really notice is the culture difference for scientists and the sort of rough and ready nature of politics and social debate, and also the very rude nature of online discussion where people behave quite badly and not in ways they normally would in real life. But one of the problems for scientists is that you go through your professional life learning to take to your heart the opinion of your peers. And then it's very difficult, I think, when you enter into that world of political debate, to realise that you need to have, and I see Dennis nodding as a politician, you need to learn a thick skin, grow a thick skin to cope with that. And I do think that's quite important. I don't think we'll ever sanitise, and probably shouldn't try and sanitise, public discussion enough to make it feel like a safe environment for most researchers. I think what we need to do is to consider where effort is best spent, and also where criticism really matters and you must listen, and where sometimes I think you can set rules by which you don't take to heart the things that people will throw. Having said that, I have seen some reaction among researchers and policymakers and those concerned with misinformation to comments as though they are all just, populist-driven rubbish, and don't see within them the legitimate question, or the reasonable question, I should say, that people are asking. So I do think we need to be careful not to form too many cliques around the ideas of what policy follows from the evidence. A lot of people live in this world knowing that what's good for them is not good for me, and they approach any policy decision with that suspicion of authority and with good reason, as well as approaching the evidence that comes with it in that way. So I think thinking carefully about how to separate those two things in a discussion is incredibly important, and that we don't just dismiss questions and issues being raised simply because they don't sound like they're on the same right thinking page as our own thoughts.
Okay. Thank you so much, Tracy. And I'm going to request each of you now to, the questions are not so few, but when we're running out of time, but there's an advantage that we've all managed to give our views and questions. Then there's the slight advantage that we can't deal with all of it, but I'll just ask each of us now to, Tracy, did you realize those were your closing remarks? No? Okay, if there's a minute or two at the end, I'll ask you to give your closing remarks. Anne, please close. Respond to something and then close.
Sujatha Raman? That is you. Could we distinguish journal article knowledge from evidence for complex policy challenges that no single article can possibly provide? And I think that's an apt question. And that, I think, is the whole point of deploying large language models and AI across that broad, inclusive corpus. And what we are trying to do currently is to move away from the idea that one article could answer any question or set policy, but could a synthesis of that knowledge improve, for example, the drafting process of a policy document in terms of timeliness, completeness, and relevance? And are these resulting Gen AI-assisted drafts representative and unbiased? And that forms the core of our work with UCL and other collaborators. And can the knowledge claims in these briefings be succinctly connected to the underpinning of evidence in the publications they cite? And I think that's important too. We all need to understand that we are working with trusted and vetted content. And there is a difference between using ChatGPT on a wide open scale versus understanding where content sources come from. And we need to work together in an open environment with metadata as well to ensure that this is working smoothly. My closing remarks would say that there's no silver bullet here, right? But there is, I think, increasingly a mandate to address things in a more rapid and impactful way. We're having lots and lots of dialogues about changing measurements and academic incentives for tenure and promotion to have more societal impact, which relates to policies impacting communities. And technological solutions are a part of it. Last month, Elsevier published a report called View from the Top, which was interviews with 115 presidents, rectors, and chancellors. And it was really about what's keeping them up at night. And one of the things that's keeping them up at night is the complex problems like climate change and geopolitical tensions, which they see getting more acute as time goes on. And 79% of them are looking for technological solutions, in addition to others, to solve these problems. So we need to understand how to make it more effective together with humans in the loop to solve these policy challenges. And I just want to close by thanking everyone at INGSA for a wonderful conference and the opportunity to be here.
Thank you so much, Anne. James, is there a question you'd like to respond to briefly and then just close?
I'll just pick the one from Anonymous saying, it links a bit to Anne's one just now, but evidence in terms of journal articles written in English and published, or other types of evidence, question mark. And just to say that that's one example of the kind of area where I think there's a very productive deeper interaction to happen between all the agendas that are at play now on the design of the research system side of these debates, meta-research debates, if you like, about how we think about assessment systems, measurement, rewards, evaluation frameworks. I mean, Peter mentioned some of this as well. Whether we're incentivizing and rewarding scientists and other academics for doing the kind of transdisciplinary work that the science advice system needs in order to provide relevant evidence to decision makers. So yeah, pluralizing, broadening our systems of measurement of what constitutes quality and impact. It was good to see the session yesterday on expanding definitions of excellence, which is one part of that discussion, I think is a very important part of fixing some of the sort of upstream challenges in the science advice system in terms of barriers and impediments to, many researchers spending time in these arenas and producing work that is salient and usable by policy and other audiences. So I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Justine, would you like to make your remarks?
Thank you, Connie. Maybe I will address the question of lack of confidence. Here, I think the problem could be how we started with them. We want them to integrate on an existing project, or we want them to be with us at the beginning where we are trying to design the project. It will have more impact when they know what it means, they know they are part of it, they know that their value also are included. So sometimes they say the public or the community trusts more scientists or experts than a leader of industry or a leader or political leader or a media. So if scientists can approach them, communicate well, like build trust among them, I think that they can be more open to have other type of knowledge or technology with them. I would just conclude by saying that the expanded evidence is completely linked with inclusion. And when we talk about inclusion, we need to take into consideration the different barriers that we could have, like language barrier. In my country, Cameroon, for example, we have 200 languages. So if we really want to include everybody or every community, when we want to take evidence, we need to make sure that we are using maybe the same terminology that may exist in one language and not another language. We make sure that we include the different value of the different community, and that are things that we need to consider so that the information and knowledge could be shared without problem. So, and I would just say also that there is a last aspect that I think is important when we want to include different type of knowledge. We need to make sure that it's legitimate, like really, like it's not unbiased, it's fair, and then we need to know that it's credible, because some people can just come with information which are not credible. I think that's what I can say for my closing remark.
Thank you so much. And while I'm up on stage, I'll also take the opportunity to say that I've been thinking about this word inclusivity that we use. And as I've been listening to us, inclusivity, when you think about it, is about including others, but including them in what? It sort of gives the includer a certain power. And I think that we should also be aware that we may need to be included by the other communities, politicians, indigenous knowledge holders. Maybe that's also why they don't really trust us. They don't include us. They don't. So it's a two-way thing. It's not just that we have to think about how can we get them to join us as though we are on the right train going in the right direction. Mm-hmm. It's also how can we make efforts to join them and go together. So thanks a lot for that. Jean-Pierre?
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. I would like to take a question, the question from Nouf, and I think there's the same question, just interested to answer. How can we address the lack of confidence in indigenous knowledge tech by local communities when the status quo is to lie on the outside? I will just take an example. This is from a Cameroonian philosopher and the theologian, Jean-Pierre, in one of his books. He mentioned an example of someone in a village in Cameroon. Not just community, not just an individual, like someone who is sick, for example. He will go to the church, like they pray for him. He will go to the hospital, and in the evening, he will go to see a traditional healer. So that is the same person doing that. So I think, for example, about indigenous knowledge, they are part of people, like a culture, a system. What we need is to promote them. Like But promoting them, when you are talking in terms of science, it doesn't mean that we need to romanticize them. Not at all. Like, even in terms of science, of course, science, we have also single story. Again, the danger of a single story. And coming back also to science, it's not just about data. It's not like something like a dogma. We have this is objective, but also when you're talking about evidence, it means narrative. How we tell the story of those data and how we select them. And from there, I would like, and I think there was also another question, say, who speaks, who's talk about that? And I would like to end by quoting Paulo Freire, who said, one cannot expect a positive result from an educational or political action program which fails to respect the particular view of the world held by the people. Such a program constitutes cultural invasion, good intentions notwithstanding.
Thank you so much. Paulo Freire is one of my favorite philosophers. I've read so many of his books. Tracy?
Yeah.
As before, we shall let you wrap it up, please.
Thank you. Well, I've had some pushback on this point about researchers, when they really do face things like physical attacks and abuse and so on. And I think that's a key point here, that we can do, we can encourage people to have the tools of a good policy discussion, a good public discussion, ways to connect between the research base and the questions that are facing us, right? But there are some things that as a society we need to grapple with and to express. I think we're not very good, and we haven't up till now got caught up with the modern age where a lot of debates are happening in the way they're happening online and unfolding, people being approached online about evidence issues and so on. And I think we need to start stating what kind of a world we want to live in, where we share this evidence and have these discussions. There isn't an articulation of the things we value. Perhaps one or two areas, independent statistics. Most of us can explain that we like independent statistics or we think that's important. We need to explain really create social value around open and honest and transparent discussion about evidence, and state that this means listening to results we don't like, that we put a greater value on the freedom to bring research into the public space than we do on the upset that those results might cause to us. And I think we have to, as multiple societies, we have to come together to say that's a social value, just as we should start to value people who enable us to ask difficult questions. I mean, it's incredible to me that the world is full of people who want to clamp down and censor on Facebook and define what is science and misinformation, disinformation, and yet librarians at community, school, university, national level, librarians are a dying breed. They are people who are skilled at taking us as whether we are scholars or members of the public, taking our questions and helping us to find where the answers lie. And also politicians, all of the parliaments have libraries as well. So I think what we socially value needs to, this is what I'm taking from INGSA, is a whole workload associated with that, to get out there and actually make a bit more of a public statement about the kind of world that we want to live in.
Okay, thank you very much. May I have these, yes, please, can you give a very big, see, you're learning to clap unprompted because our panel did very well, but you also did very well. And I must let you know that you were participating in a very big personal experiment to see how we could collaborate in a plenary and get some work done, but we've seen that there's also some trade-offs, some questions were not answered, some comments were not highlighted, but it gives us the possibility to approach each of these and also to discuss the issues that have come up in this plenary. I'll give the floor back to you, Binyam, and thank you all. Binyam, they are clapping for me, not for you.
Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. Can I also ask you one round of applause to Connie and to all the panelists for a very informative session. Just a few notes on the next sessions and a few reminders. During lunchtime, there is a satellite event Unlocking Solutions Through Transformational Science, Outlooks for Africa, from 1 to 1:45. So please, if you have time, attend. And there is an award ceremony in the afternoon break from Global Development Network that you are also invited to attend. And another note about tomorrow's satellite events, there are 2 of them: Translating Research into Practice and Promoting Endogenous Knowledge by OSC. So you are also, if you are around, please attend. So I won't hold you anymore. It's time to re-energize, to take a few boosters. For some of us, it's coffee. For others, it's tea or walk. So we'll have 15 minutes break, and there will be the morning parallel sessions, 3 of them in the different rooms. So thank you once again, 4 of them, 4 parallel sessions. Anything else, Grant? Okay. So thank you very much, and we see you later. Thanks.